Well, good evening. Good evening, all. It is slightly after 7:03. I will call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen, June 26th at 7 p.m. To order. All selectmen are present, and I would invite everyone in the room to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yep. We do have transmission of Treasury warrants 51, 51A, 52, and 52A to deal with. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Motion to approve?
Second.
And seconded. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? It is unanimous. Thank you. I'm going to give Jeff just a second to come back in, but I'll say that it's great to see a nice full room of friendly faces. Sometimes the full rooms aren't always friendly faces, so it's it's very, very good to have you all here tonight. Our 7 o'clock appointment is with the Board of Selectmen, and specifically to recognize the achievements of one Mr. Robert P. Palmer. Mr. Palmer is joining us here this evening with his family. Mr. Palmer will certainly ask you to introduce your dear ones in a few moments, but we wanted to take a few moments to express our appreciation for your many, many years of service to the town, which will be highlighted in some great detail in just a few moments. I'm going to ask Mr. Hull to sort of go through the litany of incredible contributions that you've made to our country as well as to our community over the course of 60-something years. I didn't do the math before coming. I should have. I apologize. But I know that at one point it says your first job in the town of Wilmington was in 1953. And you've been steadily at it up until a couple of months ago. So that's a remarkable, remarkable achievement, and certainly worthy of recognition this evening. And anyone in town who sees Mr. Palmer around over the course of the 4th of July or after ought to extend a hand and thank him for his amazing service to our town. So thank you, sir, very, very much. At this time, Jeff, why don't I turn it over to you, and you can read the proclamation that we have prepared for you, sir, and then we'll go to comments.
So this proclamation has been signed by the Board of Selectmen, and it reads as follows: where Robert P. Palmer is a veteran of the United States Army, having served his country from October 1954 until he was honorably discharged as SP 3(T) in October 1956, and whereas Robert P. Palmer served his country during the Korean conflict, having spent 1 year, 6 months, and 11 days overseas, and where on September 1, 1953, Robert P. Palmer began his career with the town of Wilmington as a laborer with the Highway Department, and whereas Robert P. Palmer was subsequently appointed foreman, superintendent of highways, and superintendent of the Department of Public Works, and whereas Robert P. Palmer served the town of Wilmington as a special police officer from 1962 through 1979, and whereas Robert P. Palmer served as acting town manager during the absence of the town manager, and whereas Robert P. Palmer retired from employment with the town of Wilmington on February 6, 1998, and throughout his career he has consistently exemplified professionalism and an unwavering commitment to community, and whereas Robert P. Palmer was elected to the Board of Selectmen on April 21, 2001, and served until April 17, 2004. And whereas Robert P. Palmer was appointed to the Finance Committee on May 12, 2005, and served as a member until April 29, 2017, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen expresses its congratulations and utmost gratitude for past service to country and community, and its sincerest best wishes for health, happiness, and good fortune in the days ahead. Furthermore, be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen hereby recognizes Robert P. Palmer for his dedication to the town of Wilmington and offers the key to the town of Wilmington, given this 26th day of June, 2017.
So, Mr. Palmer, in just a few moments, as I said, I'm going to offer my colleagues here an opportunity to congratulate you and thank you for your service and offer any other comments. But we'll have you come up. We're going to take a photo, and I'll be darned, I didn't know we actually had a key to the town, but there it is right there. So you'll be in possession of that. So if anyone needs to get in, go see Mr. Palmer. So why don't I start off to my left here, Ed? Please.
Mr. Palmer, I just want to keep it simple because it was well said what was just said. God bless you and your family, and thank you for your service to this country and this community, and we know that you love this community. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've known Bob Palmer a long time. In fact, I served with Bob Palmer as a member of the Board of Selectmen, and Jeff made a note that he was acting town manager. Well, Bob Palmer was acting town manager. It was before Jeff's time. Jeff was back in here in 1988. I was elected to the board in '87. Buzz Stapchinsky was the town manager. So when Buzz had to take a little trip away, Bob Palmer was sitting right at that table, right at that desk, and he was the acting chair. So he's done a great job. When he was the superintendent of public works, Bob, you was always out there. I remember you up early in the morning. You were out there all the time. The streets always get plowed. You did a fantastic job. The Palmer Stewart family, wonderful folks in the community, and you know, you wear a lot of hats. And I want to wish you all the best, and have certain memories with you being here, because I'm like an oldie but goodie as well. And I think you've done a great job, Bob. And I don't think anybody could come as far as you can, with all the dedication on the different hats you wore in this town. You're a gentleman. Thank you,
Mr. Kyra.
Mr. Palmer, congratulations. I add that up to about 64 years of work and volunteer to this town of Wilmington, which you love, and we all love you. And I went to school with your son Pat, and we had some good times. And I know that the town is much better for having you in it serving the town in the capacities that you did, and can't say much more than congratulations, best wishes, thank you for your service in the military, and thank you for the many years that you've volunteered here. And I'm sure that, as many of us will do, we'll be knocking at your door, calling your house for some advice, and I'm positive that you'll give us that advice. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. Thank you very much. Appreciate you being here this evening. Obviously, you have a very beautiful family, so congratulations to you. And I want to thank you as somebody who grew up here during the time that you were serving the town, and I really appreciate everything you did to be one of the people that makes this such a great community. People like you have made Wilmington the greatest place to live, so I appreciate all you've done, and I appreciate the example you've set for folks like us, what service really means to this community. So hopefully we can live up to the bar that you've set so high. So I appreciate your service to our country, I appreciate your service to our community, and I wish you very well in a long and healthy retirement.
Thank you, Mr. Bendel. I echo those sentiments, of course. You know, when I was new on this board 8.5-ish years ago, just trying to find my way and find my voice, you, sir, were a mentor to me in the way that you conducted yourself. You are a gentleman among gentlemen. Your ability to be tough on the issues and steadfast in your opinions, but also to engage with even those that may have an opposing opinion as yours in a way that's respectful and gentlemanly, to me is an example to all of us as to how we ought to be conducting our lives. And so thank you for living as an example for certainly us at this board, but all of us in this community. So I also wish you great happiness and a lot of good fun in your retirement years. You've certainly earned it. So thank you, sir, very much. So why don't, you know, Mr. Chair,
if I could just offer a few comments as well. So I came to Wilmington in 1987, 27 years old, I guess, at that time. And, you know, Bob was one of the people that really had no concern whatsoever about sharing his knowledge. From my perspective, learning a lot about Wilmington itself, its history, and then also in many respects taking me under his wing, so to speak, in terms of learning a little bit about governing and how we operate as public officials. you know, I've always considered him a mentor, a tremendous amount of wisdom, and I'll just give you a couple of examples that I still consider pretty valid words of wisdom to this day. One of them I remember him offering to me was, if the press is ever critical of you, never shoot back because they have more ink. And the second point that always comes to mind is when you, in terms of public places, whether it's the playgrounds or the buildings, stay on top of the maintenance, because when things start to go south, if you don't stay on top of it, it kind of emboldens people to do more to deteriorate our parks and all. So, you know, those two pieces of wisdom I've always thought about, and I think they still hold just as true today as they did back then. So, Bob, I consider you a friend, and all the best.
Mr. Palmer, I'd love to give you the floor if you have any comments you'd like to express on your own, or I think introducing the whole room might be a little bit much, but certainly want to give you the opportunity to speak.
I'd like to introduce my wife,
Of course.
Jane. And the rest of my
And the family. They're wonderful, and I'm glad you all could make it tonight. Shall we step in front, gentlemen, and we'll give the key to Mr. Palmer as well as his proclamation, and we'll invite you to come up with us, sir. You're coming through this? I'm sorry.
Sure. No, it's you guys.
Where's that awesome key? Yeah, that's you. You're gonna find a spot on the wall for it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Jeff, why don't you join in on one of the corners here? I think it's appropriate. We'll get Beverly first, and then we'll go on the room. Where we going? Robert?
Yeah. 1, 2, 3.
Standing up at the back. Everybody get up. And Mrs. Palmer, over here.
The matriarch. Yeah. I forget her.
Last but certainly not least.
She's the real boss.
We should have thanked her, right?
Danielle, I know.
We're going to get another plaque made for Mrs. Palmer. Well, thank you again, sir. I think we got all the pictures, right? That's your key. Use it.
What does it
Use it fits everything, as it turns out. Yeah. It fits everything. Use it liberally. Thank you for being here.
Good night.
Thank you all, and have a great night. Yeah, you're welcome to stay. Amen.
Losing your friendly audience?
We'll get through it.
Our only audience.
That's all right.
It's okay.
Thank you, folks. Our 7:15 scheduled appointment, I will say that's the way to start a meeting. I don't know about you fellows, but that brings me great joy. Our 7:15 appointment is with Michael Morris, our town accountant, with regards to borrowing for a fire pumper and Yentile Farm recreational facility. I won't belabor or try to summarize it, so Mike, I'll turn it right over to you to jump right in, and then we'll have opportunities for questions. And so
clearly,
please.
this isn't exciting as that was, but
It's pretty exciting.
similar to last year, we issued a bond anticipation note. This year, we're issuing it. We're issuing another year-long note. They've gone out to bid. we took the lowest bidder, which came in at 2%, plus about $44,000 in premium. This is a very similar exercise to what we did last year. We have some votes that you have to take. Those votes will authorize the Board of Selectmen, the treasurer, and the other town officials to sign documents to issue this debt. These approvals will approve the sale of the notes, allow the treasurer to approve the notice of sale, authorize the treasurer to deliver a significant events disclosure in case something significant happened in the town that would impact our ability to pay. Of course, we don't anticipate anything like that. Also, it would direct the treasurer to implement federal tax compliance. We have to sign off that we will follow any tax requirements that are out there. Basically, very few of them apply to us. Also, will authorize the selectmen and town clerk and the treasurer to take any actions to complete this issuance and to execute the documentations that are required to get the loan.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Jeff, do you have any additional commentary to supplement what Mr. Morris just offered?
Just as a reminder, so as Mike indicated, the board did authorize this last year at this time. It was a bond anticipation note, which is a one-year borrowing. That note expires on June 27th. So by taking action this evening, this will reauthorize a bond anticipation note which will run through June 29th. The purpose of this borrowing, if you recall, is $4.8 million for the Yentile Park construction, and then $650,000 which was authorized at a town meeting for the purchase of a fire pumper. So those two amounts in the aggregate come up to the $5,450,000, which is before you this evening.
Very well. Thank you both. Perhaps, yeah, so thank you. I'm sorry. I'd like to see if there's questions or concerns by anybody. So I don't know if Mr. Kara? No? No. Gentlemen? It seems fairly straightforward. I don't have questions either. I did until you kind of said what you said. So we're really, it's a reissuing, and I think you said it here, a reissuing of the bond anticipation to carry us for another year, did you say? Until June of next year.
So next year, at about this time, we will be coming to you for a permanent borrowing, long-term financing. So at that point, we will need to issue more permanent debt, which will extend out for a longer period of time. So there's limits in terms of how often you can issue bands before you go to permanent financing.
Okay, very well. Unless there's other questions, I would ask for someone to, I guess we have to go through multiple votes here, is that correct?
Yes.
So right down the line, I would ask for a motion to approve the sale of the notes.
I make a motion that we approve the sales of the notes as described by the town manager under the dollar amounts.
Second.
I have that motion made and seconded. Is there discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
And then, just if you would like, I can just go through each of these for purposes of introducing the motion.
Please.
So the next would be that in connection with the marketing and sale of the notes, the preparation and distribution of a notice of sale and preliminary official statement dated June 8, 2017, and a final official statement dated June 15, 2017, each in such form as may be approved by the town treasurer, be and hereby are ratified, confirmed, and approved and adopted.
So moved.
I have that made as a motion
Second.
and seconded. Additional discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
And then further, that the town treasurer and the Board of Selectmen be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver a significant events disclosure undertaken in compliance with SEC Rule 15C2-12 in such form as may be approved by bond counsel to the town, which undertaking shall be incorporated by reference in the note for the benefit of the holders of the note from time to time.
So moved. As described.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you.
And then further, that we authorize and direct the treasurer to establish post-issuance federal tax compliance procedures in such form as the treasurer and bond counsel deem sufficient, or if such procedures are currently in place, to review and update said procedures in order to monitor and maintain tax-exempt status of the notes.
So moved as described.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? See none? All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you.
And then further, that each member of the Board of Selectmen, the town clerk, and the town treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing votes.
Motion to accept and approve as described by the town manager.
Seconded.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Again, thank you. I think that concludes all of the votes we needed to take for that.
Yes, and just for your information, following the conclusion of the meeting, if board members would please just meet me in my office to sign off on each of the documents. They're all tabbed, and you can take care of that at that point.
Very well. Thank you. Unless there's anything else, Mr. Morris?
I'm all done.
We thank you for your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Michael.
And another, what I anticipate to be positive visit this evening is with Teresa Marciello, our Elderly Services Director, and William Kavanaugh, Fire Lieutenant, to give us a rundown of the Remembering When program that was recently held. I'm anxious to hear about this from both of you, so thank you for being here.
Oh, thank
And
you for
welcome.
inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
We'll turn it right over to you. I'm anxious, like I said, to hear how things have gone and are going, so please jump right in.
Thank you. So we had, myself and Terry had talked about having an educational portion of fire and fall prevention for elder adults. My predecessor, Lieutenant Hurley, through the Mass Department of Fire Services, had gotten us a grant, much like we do for the students in the schools through the SAFE program, but for older adults. We had worked about 2 years before we went to the Remembering When NFPA conference, and we did training for our seniors. What that did for us is it gave us kind of a baseline as to what we wanted to do and saw what we wanted to accomplish. I got an email from Cindy Ouellette, who's our DFS point of contact for SAFE, and it told us about this grant to go to San Antonio to get trained by an FPA to administer their program. We applied for the grant through a letter by the manager, Mr. Hull, and my chief, Chief McClellan, who were accepted into the grant and wound up going to San Antonio for 3 days and learn this program. On our return, we actually sat and they basically told us, you know, come up with what you think works for your community. So we sat down, we trained Laura Pickett, who is the case manager for Wilmington Elderly Services, and then we came up with this.
So in the process of doing that, we were trying to think as to the information that we learned, how to make it engaging and fun for the elders. We make a great tag team, so we kind of came up with an idea that instead of just giving it a one-shot informational and making it like a 1 hour, 2 hour thing and then that's it, we feel that that wouldn't be enough. So what we decided to do is make it a 6-month program. It ran from January to June, which is right now. Each month was broken up again. If you remember, we were saying falls and fire prevention. So each month was a certain discussion, whether it be smoke detectors, whether it be about electric heaters. It was a number of things. We also had guest speakers, someone talking about Lifeline, another person talking about safety equipment, how important it is to have safety equipment. And one of the big things that we did was that in May, there was quite a bit of discussion as to an experience happened in someone's home that their fire extinguisher kind of went off. And so it caused, mind you, we had 33 people, kind of caused a lot of discussion of people being very concerned what's going to happen. I don't really want to use a fire extinguisher. Mind you, I did say 33 people, and we always had 30 or more that were at those monthly meetings. So what happened is that we did, actually each person got to experience the fire extinguisher. And it was actually a really good experience. So then at the end, we had a certificate program. This is as saying everyone got a certificate. And just last week, we were very fortunate to be able to pass out these certificates. But we are also very fortunate in the sense that the person that runs Karen Berard Reed, who actually is the person that gets this whole entire program going for the nation, actually their office is right in Quincy. So she was able to come to us on Thursday, last Thursday, for our certificate program along with the town manager, Jeff Hull, and we really had a great occasion. And what was so wonderful about that piece of it too is that elders got to really share with Karen exactly how this program affected them and really made them more self-aware, fall and fire. When you talk about fall prevention, people do not like to discuss that at all. So again, incorporating it with fire, and fire isn't always something that they think they know a lot. As time goes on, they realize that they really did learn quite a bit from the program. Do you want to add anything, to that?
The only other thing to add is that another part of this program, besides just the group exercises that we did with a book that we put together so that they had every lesson in notes and everything, they got to take these home, was Laura was a huge part of our program, and still is, because it's still going until December is when our program officially ends. So we're looking to do another group class. But going into their homes, doing home safety inspections, Laura does a lot of that for us because she's in their homes all the time. She's a case manager. Myself and Terry do go in, we install smoke and CO detectors for them, and we do the safety inspection, if you will, at that same time. And we just give them pointers on what we think they could do that would make it a little bit safer for them to stay in their homes as long as possible.
And I think that was the key, just as he said, stay in your homes as long as possible. I think people get really concerned when we go in, when Bill and I would go in their homes thinking that we were going to question, like, this isn't a safe home, you really need to leave your home type thing. And part of this program, too, was to say, no, this is just information that we really want you to be safe in your home, to be able to stay in your home. And I think people really got that loud and clear, that we weren't there to say, you're doing this wrong or you're doing that wrong. This is just sharing information to make things in a safer environment for them in their homes.
That's it.
So that's pretty much the just like Bill said, this goes through December. So as part of this grant program, we do have to write a 6-month review and then an end-of-the-year review as to some of the things that people were saying, different things that we did as a community, because each community, just as Bill was saying, does it a little bit different. I have to say, Karen was very impressed as to how we devised this program in this way. And so we were really happy that she was able to be a part of it, because it's such a wonderful thing, especially where she and a group of people devised this program to really be able to talk to the people and to get a feel for it. So we were lucky in that way.
Well, thank you. Certainly, thank you for implementing the program and finding the grant money and bringing it to our communities. It sounds very impressive. The only question that popped into my head was, you run until December. Is the hope or the desire to take a break year and then do it again? There's always new members in the senior community that potentially wouldn't have had exposure to it.
Perfect segue.
Yep. So the way that the program runs, so for the 1 year, we have to keep track of our numbers, how many falls we're preventing as opposed to what we had. So when we went to San Antonio, we had to come with some information. Where we're at numbers-wise for falls, for fires with seniors, for injuries from such. And now as we go on and we get into December and we have to do our finals, we have to give that number and show a reduction. The grant, we won't be tasked to go back to another training, but we can continue to run this program. So I use the money from SAFE from the state of Massachusetts and we're using it to augment this program as well. So that's, the money from SAFE was just kind of, here you go, figure out how you're going to teach seniors. They had some lesson plans, but it wasn't as structured as this, whereas their student side of it is very structured. Here's all the lessons you can do and age-appropriate things. The senior community is unique in such that you have seniors that are 62 and you have seniors that are 95,
Right.
and they are definitely different generations. So to use this program and what we did, like Terry said, was adjust it to what worked for us in the group that we had, I think worked out well. So we will continue this program with the SAFE from Mass DFS to continue the program for seniors as they're coming in. I think we're looking to do it probably twice a year. So we'll take the summer off, and then we'll do kind of like a fall, winter semester, and then a spring, summer semester, I guess, if you want to put it that way.
Sure.
We actually have a couple of volunteers that when we first start to make, just to kind of be our spokesperson to be able to get more people engaged in wanting to do this. But just like he was saying, we're hoping to be able to start this in September again.
And I think I know the answer before asking it. By virtue of the fact you're getting 30-plus people to every session, what has been the feedback of the attendees? Are they really happy with what they're exposed to?
Yeah, they're very happy, and even Karen had said to us, now this program's unique as well because every community that was involved, from Canada, Texas, wherever, they were from all over North America, was that they're all different things. They're not all Wilmington. They're not all just, this is your population, that's it. In Texas, they had counties, so they were covering hundreds of square miles. So when they did a training, they were kind of going to like a church over here or a high school over there and getting 4 and 5 people. There wasn't that, we're lucky here because we have that concentrated place for them to be in the senior center. And Terry and Laura do a great job up there keeping them engaged with activities. So this was something that, our first class, we had 26 seniors that were going to participate. Our second class, we had 33. So in that first class, the thing with the senior community is if they like it, word spreads extremely fast, and they all flock to it, or they all run away from it. So she was impressed that we were able to get that many people in one spot consistently. Yes.
Great.
So
Well, again,
they loved it.
Thank you, and thank you for the collaboration. I love to see, interdepartmental sort of collaboration in this way, really for the benefit of this population. So, thank you for bringing it to our attention and
Thank
coming
you.
tonight.
Thank you
I want to
very
make
much.
syou that I go to the board. Greg, you indicated you have some.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, thank you both for your presentation. Appreciate it. Terry, I'll start with you. Thanks for your efforts here. This is just another example of how you go above and beyond to offer really unique offerings to our seniors. Everything from the talent show that you do, and this is just another great example. I have to point out that my mother is one of your newest customers up there.
Yes.
She really speaks highly of the crocheting class and the yoga, so appreciate that. But thank you for this, and continue to do what you do. It's awesome what you offer for the town. And to the lieutenant, thank you for what you've done here, and appreciate what you do not only here for the seniors, but for our students as well, and helping keep Wilmington safe. I really appreciate everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything?
Sounds like a great program, very positive for the seniors of the town. Just a quick question, the 26 or 33 that you have for the first, say, semester portion, for the second half of the year, is it the same 33, or is it a new group of?
New group.
It's a new group. Oh, so that's good.
Yeah.
That's great. You're reaching out, getting more involvement, so that's great.
Yeah, it is a new group, and what, like Terry had said, we're going to have some of the seniors who've already completed or had their certificate of completion for the program. They can come back. We've invited them back to discuss with the new seniors what's going on. One of the best things we did, open forum lessons. So we would talk about a fall or keeping a stairway clear, and they'd come up with these other things. But what about this and what about that? Really steered the conversation of things that were really unique to their situation. It would garner that conversation within the whole group. So these lessons were slated for 2 hours. Some of them went 2.5, 3. So
And right now, it's all voluntary, right? And word of mouth voluntary, you don't,
Yes.
or do you, sometimes you hear of someone who may need this type of program and reach out to them and say, hey, why don't
That's
you come
really-
and,
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's really, first, like someone in the home that's having a hard time that we
Yeah.
come aware of, that is where that piece of Laura Pickett, the case manager, comes in. Where she in turn goes out, and there's a piece in this, this workshop, this program, that when she makes the home visits, that's a little criteria that she can go through. So if there's red flags, then she can alert myself or Bill, and we do further work.
That's great.
But they do encourage each other to show up. That's how we got from 26 to 33, is they
That's great.
said, hey, you may want to show up to this, and they decided to
Now
come
even
in.
more because we had food at the end.
Oh, yeah, well, I think we're going to do about 100 next
Provide them
time.
with food.
That's great.
Is that
Very nice.
No, just quickly, it's all been said, but it basically money that's well spent, and it definitely is paying off in dividends, and it's educational, and you're helping folks, plain and simple. That's what it's all about. And you can't speak any louder than that. It's in a positive way. And appreciate what you both do to make that happen. It really means a lot to folks and loved ones that their folks participate in this. It means something. Thank you.
To both of you, thank you. Terry, my mother-in-law, Marilyn, speaks very highly of you, so in my eyes, that's awesome. I love the programs that you bring to the senior center and to Lieutenant Kavanaugh. Like Mr. Bendel said, thank you for helping our seniors and our young students. I really appreciate what you both bring to this great community, so thank you.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Jeff, did you have anything? I'm sorry.
No, it was all been said. I think, you've got two great folks here that, the collaboration was incredible, and clearly they're invested in what they do.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Our scheduled 7:45 meeting, and I don't know if you want, Jeff, do we want to go right real punctual with 7:45, or should we read a few communications? I'm not sure.
I think we can go forward. Valerie's
All
here.
right, I concur. So, 7:45 scheduled appointment, a few minutes early will be, or is, with Valerie Gingrich, Wilmington's Director of Planning and Conservation, with regards to affordable housing and implications for development and zoning. Valerie has some visual aids that I will allow her to set up, so give her just a few moments. Valerie, thanks for being here. So Valerie, and all, this was a conversation that had begun, I guess, about a month ago, if I'm right. And at the conclusion of the meeting where you sort of introduced some of this discussion topics to us, it seemed clear, I think, to everyone that this was an ongoing, or a conversation that needed to continue to be ongoing. And Mr. McCoy, I think specifically, although I think all of us shared in the desire to, sooner than later, have you back in and dive in a little bit deeper, or at least get a more comprehensive understanding of some of the nuances of this issue. So I'm grateful to you for bringing charts and graphs, because that speaks to me. So I won't belabor the point, Jeff, unless you have anything else specifically you want to lay in terms of introductory.
No, I think you've said it
Very well.
appropriately.
So Valerie, I'll hand you the ball, and we'll see where this takes us.
Great. Valerie Gingrich, Director of Planning and Conservation. Thank you for having me. First, I want to talk about a little bit of contextual example that's being talked about right now as a potential development site, which is 613 Main Street. Just to be clear, I haven't heard or seen any proposals for that site. This site is currently zoned industrial. So any sort of housing development there would have to go through town meeting to get approval for rezoning. But I guess the reason I bring it up is because the concern over that site is a concern that I share and actually ties into what we're talking about tonight, because if we fall below our 10% affordable housing across town, that site could be a 40B development, which with 40B developments, the local zoning is not taken into account, and development can be denser, be higher, be bigger than what we would normally allow. So I think that type of example is in some ways helpful to talk about sort of the context of affordable housing and our goals for affordable housing. And like I said, I don't know of proposals. I haven't talked to anyone about it, but as a vacant site, someone's probably looking at it. So I'd like to sort of go through kind of some context for affordable housing and go over the terms for people in the audience, for people at home, for you all, and then sort of try to talk about a path to maintaining our 10% in 2020. So to start off with this board right next to me and the handout next to you, the goal for housing is to provide multifamily housing and affordable housing across the state, and that's a state goal. And the state sets the goal at 10% in each town or city. So that's why we talk about the 10%. Every town and city has a goal of 10% that's sort of set by the state. And you have sort of two options here on this handout and the visual. If you're below 10%, you go over to the left or to the right, my other left, to the right to 40B. And that's what I was just talking about as far as the 40B is a statute that allows for a single permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals. So you don't have to get a parcel rezoned to do a project. You don't have to go to town meeting. You don't have to go to the planning board. It's just a single approval through the Board of Appeals, where you don't have to follow the local zoning. So you can be higher than are allowed 3 stories. You can be denser. You can be just generally bigger than we would normally allow. So if you're below the 10%, developers are allowed to come in and do that process. And examples of those are below there. Most of our apartment buildings were built through 40B. That's how we got a lot of our affordable units in town. Examples are Avalon, Shawshing Commons, Buckingham Estates, sort of the gamut of projects. The other pathway is if you're greater than 10%, which we currently are, you can avoid those types of projects. But the 10%, to count towards the 10%, you have to be on the state's DHCD, so the Department of Housing and Community Development. They have a subsidized housing inventory. And to be counted on that, you have to follow certain requirements. So it's, when we talk about affordable housing, it's not just the price point that matters. It's that you've followed specific things, that the unit is deed restricted in perpetuity, that it's affordable to someone who's earning 80% of area median income, which we'll get to next. And you've followed a fair housing plan, which outlines how you market the unit and how you do outreach to find a buyer or someone to rent it. So there's really strict guidelines that you have to follow to be on this subsidized housing inventory, which is the 10% list. Area median income, which is, we're just kind of going through this towards the bottom here. Area median income is not just for Wilmington, it's an area-wide income, and it includes generally greater Boston. So it's not just our town. HUD actually calculates that, the federal government, the Housing and Urban Development, calculates the area median income in those areas. And our median income is 103,400. And that's sort of the number that they kind of base other numbers off of. So to count on the SHI, the subsidized housing inventory, you have to be at 80% of that median income number or lower. So I put some examples there of what your income limit would be at 80%, which for a family of 4, you could make up to $78,000. For an individual, to just over $54,000. And then some examples of rents that you charge at that rate. So it's all, there's a lot of math and a lot of figuring out what's affordable to people making 80% area median income. And those numbers are all set by the state and the federal government. So what we have to do is sort of follow those income limits and those allowable rent and sale prices. And I put some stats on this handout and on the visuals for you just to get kind of an idea. With rent, just sort of the need that we have currently in town. In 2015, the median rent in Wilmington was over $1,600, and you have to make 100% of that AMI number to afford that. So then I was sort of putting into context of what people in town can afford. 50% of the town's households make less than that area median income number. 20% of the households make less than $50,000 a year. So there's certainly a need in town for units that are lower than market rate for our current residents. Should I stop for questions at that point for the background?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because folks may be mulling over some questions, and I don't want them to kind of get pushed aside as we gather more content. I think thank you for stopping there. Yeah, so now's as good a time as any. Do you?
No, I'll just say, I just like to hear, the presentation. I mean, I do have some questions to ask that pertain to zoning, and I do want to talk about, to piggyback on what you said a couple of meetings ago, this exclusionary zone. I'd like to talk about that when the time comes and get a clearer understanding. I've got a good idea what that's about, but we need to talk about, and I'll say it again, I appreciate the chairman having you here to talk about the zoning. It's a lot easier to talk about what's happening at this point as opposed to 6-7 weeks before town meeting, and people aren't aware of many things until it actually gets there. And I think in the future we really need to do that, because as selectmen, we're the last people to get informed on items, or at least I know I am, and I'm sure many other folks, when it comes to safety, the Butters Road Bridge, that's what, traffic, we're the last ones. So when permits are given out for development, then people are upset, they call their selectmen. So I think it's really kind of nice to have you here, and then in the future, maybe try to change some type of way that we communicate when development does come on a broad scale here in the town. Because once again, we hear it, and another set of traffic lights is not going to make a difference. We're going to move traffic quickly from this point to that point in a bottle's neck. But I think this is healthy. We need to discuss this. We need to, let folks know what's going on. And it's just that, people don't wake up one morning and just make stuff up. So I'd appreciate that if we just continue. And I do have some questions to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in if I may, and I certainly will continue to go out. You, on the right side of this chart here, underneath the 40B block, you wrote some developments that were 40B developments: Metro, Whispering Pines, Avalon, Buckingham, Regency, Shawshing Commons, Jake's Lane. Were those, I guess I'm confused about that a little bit, and then because I think you also said at one point that we are within or above the 10% threshold currently. Mm-hmm. And it feels like at least a few of those came into development over the course of the last 10 years. So was the last time we achieved a measure 10 years ago and we were above the 10%? If that's the case, then how did these become 40B projects?
Sure. So you can actually, DHCD will redo your calculation when you have a project come in. So as soon as you create those affordable units, they'll count them towards your 10%. They won't, the bottom number of this equation changes every 10 years, but they'll change the top number as soon as you create new units. So we weren't always at 10%, and that's how many of these projects happened, and they are what got us to our 10%. So at the point where we have enough units to get to 10%, they'll redo that calculation for us.
Okay, and I know that the calculation that the numerator denominator thing is coming, so I don't want to bury the lead. Okay, I'm gonna hold off because I think some of the stuff I'm thinking about is coming, so I'll wait. Please, yeah, please.
Thank you, Valerie. Just a quick question. You may or may not know the answer to this, but just for some historical perspective, do you have any idea how many times within the recent 10 to 20 years we've fallen below the 10% threshold?
Where we've been above and then fell below?
Yes, so kind of what the current situation that we're facing.
I don't know for sure, but I would guess that there haven't been many times until recently that we've been above 10%. So we've sort of been building our numbers as these projects happened. So I don't know if we were ever above, I don't know if we were ever in this situation.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add to that, having been here for a period of time, we relatively recently, within the last 10 years, hit the 10% mark, and prior to that, we were consistently below. So, you know, we have, as I recall, we have not been in a situation where we've gone above and then dropped down below. We've more recently hit the 10 and have maintained that.
So this is a unique situation, relatively.
A new one, yeah.
With bad timing as we approach 2020.
Thank you.
Valerie, once you hit the 10%, are you at that level for a particular amount of years before they then look at it again and ask what the percentage is at that point in time?
They look at it every year, but they don't change that bottom number of the equation every year. That only happens every 10 years.
10 years, okay.
Right, because of the census. So that when the census is done, that total number of housing units, which is the bottom number in the next page, that only changes every 10 years with the census. They look at the top number, the number of units that we have, they look at that annually. So that changes, you know, goes up and down a little bit every year.
But do they make changes to the housing with that top number, or do they make changes to the housing with the bottom number? So in other words, if I'm at 10% in 2015, so I'm there for the next 10 years at 10%, even if I drop below 10%.
So your bottom number would stay the same until, if it was 2015, it would stay the same until 2020 when it's redone. But if you lost a lot of units that had been counted, you may fall below 10% if you lose a lot of your affordable units for some reason.
But they're still not allowed for 40B building in that 10-year period.
No, you would be. You would.
Okay.
As soon as you fall below, you're susceptible to 40B.
Then what's the point of the 10 years?
Because that's when that's when the bottom number changes. So as we add housing, we should probably go into the second page. As we add housing units, total housing units, build more units in town, that number's increasing, which is hurting our percentage as we add more housing units. So maybe we could look at that top kind of equation up there. The top number of the equation is the number of affordable units that we have, which is right now 810. The bottom number of this fraction is the total housing units in town, total. And that number is from 2010, which is 7,788. That gets us to 10.4%. That's basically how they look at us today, right? So the bottom number is taken from the census. That changes every 10 years. The top number changes every year depending on what's happening with our affordable units. Like this past year, we got 18 Denault back on the list because there was a long, decade process of that unit going through foreclosure. We fought the bank for it, we got it back, and we got it rehabbed and sold to a family in town. So that's now counted again. So that's another, +1 on our list. Meanwhile, we have these old, about 15-year-old unit, they're not units, 15-year-old restrictions. We had a program back in the, about 15 years ago, where we had a program where you could take out a rehab loan, and if you at the time income qualified, so you made less than 80% area median income, your income wasn't too high, we could put a restriction on that loan for 15 years, and the state would count it towards our inventory. Well, since then, they don't count those anymore because there's no way to keep your income low. It's sort of a one-time, you come in for the loan, you qualify at a certain income, the next year you could make 200 grand, and we couldn't, do anything about that. So there's a little bit of a flaw in that program. So they don't count those anymore. That program isn't recognized as acceptable because they're not deed restricted. They're not those things that I listed that they have to be to count. So as these 15-year restrictions are coming up, those units are falling off of our list. And there's not just a few of them, there's 54. So we're losing 54 units that were 15-year restrictions. And we can't renew them because they don't recognize that program anymore. So I got a little ahead of myself, but our summary, and we'll go through this specifically, but summary is that our top number is changing and our bottom number is changing. So we'll go through each of those if that's helpful. Okay. So the next little chart I have here are years 2010 through 16. And that chart shows the number of new units that were constructed in town. And those are from the building department's records for brand new additional units that we've created over those years. The total for those years is 198 units at an average of 28 per year. But as you see, there's a wide variation, as low as 15 per year up to 71 per year, which is a pretty wide range.
New units meaning houses?
Yes.
Not
yes. Well,
apartments
houses or condos.
Condos, okay.
But
Just want to define with units.
Not a situation where you have a tear down rebuild. That wouldn't be a new unit. It would only be where you're, let's say, subdividing and creating a new lot in a brand new unit that wasn't there before. So these are the numbers that we have from the building department where we've added a house or a unit. So when the census is going to be taken in 2020, we sort of know how many units we're adding for those years that we have records for. We don't know exactly what we're going to come up with this year and the next couple years. So we could use an average from these numbers, right, of 28 per year. Although I get a little nervous about that because there is such a wide variation from 15 to 71. So it could be a lot more than 28 units per year. But an average is something we can work with. So you'll see the calculation down here with 2010 number of housing units. Adding to that 2010 to 2016 number of new units. And then 2017 to 2020 number of units using that 30 average of about 30 per year. And getting to what we project as our new total number of housing units in town, which would be 8,106. So that's how I got to sort of a projection of how many units we may have showing up on the census in 2020. Now the other change to the right of that is what I mentioned, that those 54 restricted units, those are expiring, so those will come off of our affordable numbers. And the equation that you see below here is when you take out those 54 units on the top number, you come up with 756. And then the bottom number of units that we just kind of calculated with our projection, and you come out to a percentage of 9.3. And what I calculate for what you would need number of units to get back to the 10% is a range of between 50 and 70 units. Kind of, we need to replace what we're losing with those 54 units falling off of the numbers, falling off of the inventory. So I'm happy to answer questions about that.
Mr. Chairman.
It's a lot
I
of...
might as well just comment on it now because you're talking about the 10%. I remember a couple of meetings ago, you said we were going to be about 60, 64 units shy of 2020. And I just heard you say to Selectman Cairo a moment ago that it seems like every 10 years there's a cycle. And it seems like prior to 2020 that we do have to still meet that 10%. I was under the impression, and by the way, who was that woman that was with you that day? She was here a couple meetings ago.
Sure.
She's from...
She's from the regional housing office. She actually runs a few of the regional housing offices.
Right.
She helps out with our regional office that's run out of Reading.
She worked
so
is she a state employee?
No, she's a housing consultant. So she does...
Housing consultant.
She works for towns doing housing consulting.
Okay.
And she's based out of Concord. It's Concord, Bedford. A bunch of towns in that area have kind of a consortium that they work together for housing things.
Because I said a couple meetings ago, and I say tonight for the love of me, I don't know why we're in a rush to make some changes if we're going to be good until 2020. Now I'm hearing that if we fall below that 10%, 2017, 2018, are we committed to meet that 10%, even though we had the blessing of the state 2020?
I'm not sure. I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I think the point here is that the denominator, as Valerie noted, the bottom number will not change until the census is taken in 2020, but the numerator, the top number, is changing, and as she noted, we're losing homes because they're coming off with that 15-year restriction. So if the numerator is less, that is adverse to us and could precipitate going below 10%. But certainly the expectation is that by 2020, because the total number of homes in the community will expand, and if the total number of affordable units is reducing, then clearly by then we would drop below 10%.
And that's, can I jump in? And that's what I was trying to get at. And I think, Mr. McCoy, not to put words in your mouth, if we drop below in 2018, are we subject to 40B? And the answer, I think, would be no, because it's not until 2020.
Well, I think it's more likely that we won't fall below by then, just because that bottom number stays the same. That's helping us out right now. So that 7788 stays the same, and it's very unlikely that we lose so many units so that we're below 10% with that bottom number intact by 2020. But when...
So we don't have to worry, we have to worry about it, but right now, we're not subject to...
At this moment, we're not...
Correct.
Right.
Until
okay.
2020.
Yes.
Okay. Because I had the impression in your presentation that we would be, but we're not going to be until 2020.
The 15-year restrictions, the 54 units, a few of some of they fall off every year. So there's a clump of them that falls off every year because we had the loan program for a series of years, and so it was 15 years long. So, you know, if all of those units came in and asked to pay back their loan all of a sudden, which doesn't really happen, then we would have to do some math to try to figure that out. but it's pretty safe to say that as those units are falling off, they're not going to end, their final fall-off point is 2020, when we change our other number, and that's when then when we hit
And the other number, I think personally, is a little inflated. I know you take an average of it all, and that's probably the best way to do it, but I think you're a little high just based off of 2012, 13, 14, and 16. There were only 17 new units. I know 2015 seems to be an anomaly that it went up to 71, but you may be projecting that high as well.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
no, that's an actual. So the 71.
Right.
Yeah.
I know that that's an
yeah.
actual, but you're projecting out what it might be in the future from 17 to 20, 120 units,
Yep.
30 a year.
Right.
That may be a little high considering 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the last 5 years, there was only 17 new
Yeah,
units.
it could
And you're
be.
projecting 30.
It could be,
Okay.
but
Just,
yeah.
yeah.
Thinking about though, I worry though because we have projects that are in their build-out phase now. We've got new projects coming before the planning board, and projects that are being designed. So we're steadily continuing to add new units, but we don't know how many will come online the next 4 years. So, right, I just used the average because it's something that we could use.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one point here that I think is important. It sounds like this is not likely to happen before 2020, but the question was raised a couple of times. If the percentage falls below 10% before 2020, we are then subject to 40B developments, correct?
I believe so, but before I commit to that, I would want to check to make sure that that's true. But they do those numbers every year, so I mean, you would have to see a major fall off of affordable units to have that be the case, which we don't see.
Right, so I guess it doesn't appear likely that we will fall below 10%, but I just don't want to leave folks with the false impression that if this number is calculated annually and for some reason, a cluster of those 54 came up in 1 year, and developers who are looking for communities to put 40Bs in, presumably they go to Housing and Community Development and look at the number, it's, while not likely, it's not impossible, I guess, if we fell below 10% prior to the census is really, the only key to that is that changes the denominator.
Right.
That's really the relevant point there.
Right.
Yeah, please,
Sure,
Greg.
just a couple quick questions here. Any indications we're halfway through 2017? Is there any way to tell where we're at so far this year in 2017?
I haven't looked at those numbers yet.
Okay, so we'd have to wait.
I can.
That'd be great, just to
Yeah.
give us a gauge. I mean, we're halfway through the year. Would give us more information in terms
Right.
of a 7-year span of 10 to 6. The other one I have a question about is that, can you just walk me through again this range of 50 to 70? You're approximating that we need 50 to 70. I mean, it seems like a pretty big range. I mean, 20 more units to me is a lot. I mean,
Right.
maybe you could walk me through.
Sure.
Do you think it's on the slow end? Do you think it's on the high end? Because I'm seeing an average of, you're stating an average of 28 a year already from private development, right?
Right. So if you do just the plain math, I think you come out to 54 units would have to be added, exactly. The range is just to, I always like to be a little bit more conservative because we don't know.
Me too.
Yeah, because we don't know how many units we're going to add in the next 4 years. So, and seeing that 71 on that 1 year gives me a little bit of, maybe we should plan a few more units just to have a little bit more of a safety cushion there. So the math itself is exactly 54 units, but we're doing some estimating, so.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful if we could find out through you just to see where we're at halfway through the year, right? Are we on pace for a year like 2015? Are we on a year like 2012 or
Right.
2016?
It's a
I mean, it's
great-
certainly something I think would be valuable to know.
I agree. You all set, Greg?
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Loud.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you for putting this on the agenda, and Mr. McCoy for pushing this, because I think it's pretty important that Valerie is, and Valerie, thank you for being here. We don't ever want to be below 10%. Again, I was on the Board of Appeals, with the exception of Avalon and Buckingham Estates. I was not part of those meetings, and their lengthy meetings. And the first one I was involved in was Regency Place, and I was an associate member at the time. And the Board of Appeals denied that, but gave the builder everything that he asked for, which was, as you know, was a very large development. It was the first largest development in town. So when Metro came on board, which was the last one on there, the town dictated what could be built there, because it was going to put us over it gave us the 10%, or better than the 10%. So he came in asking, the debt developer from Metro came in, wanted like 20 condos along that side street right there. As you notice, it's not there. And then during that process, we learned that every rental piece of that development was going to count towards our 10%, putting us well over the 10%. To answer Mr. Bendel's question, as I know it, we've never been, prior to these developments, above 10%. So we weren't down and up in my years on the Board of Appeals. So we don't ever want to be below 10%. So I like being cautious and learning about this now. So when a development does come to town, if there's ever a large one coming between now and 2020, we insist that there's some affordability in there, not only to keep our young kids here, but our elderly parents here, which is a great thing for this community. So I really appreciate you bringing this to light here, and we need to do something about it now, and I'm glad it's on the agenda and we're talking about it, because everyone out there needs to be aware of this, because there are other cities and towns around us that are fighting, one just in Woburn, they're fighting one that's going to add 7 10-story buildings because they're not above the 10%. They can do that in town if that's what we fall below that 10%. So it's important, because I remember the site visit for Regency Place, and it was a judge, and it was one of my first ones. And they're pro builders, they're pro developers. That's what they're there for. And you better come up with a real good case why you don't want to build in town if you're below the 10%. So it's important that we stay at that. I'd like to see us get above 10.4. Why not 11 or 12%, right? That's more people in town, more people staying in town. So I think it's important. I do have other questions, but I want you to finish what you've got to say. I've got some other questions. Thank you.
Mike, I'm going to go and I'm going to come right to you if you don't mind. Thank you. I don't know if it's questions or maybe just sort of some viewpoints. I want to just go on record and say, like, I recognize that there is a concern by a great many people in our population about traffic and about the populations in the schools, and those are all appropriate concerns. I'm a resident here too, so I have those same concerns. But the challenge that is thrust upon us by the state in Chapter 40B is that we have to maintain 10% or more of our housing stock as affordable. And so that we have to wrestle with that rule, that law. And so we can, I guess, I would rather see a new development come into town that admittedly will add more congestion and traffic and hopefully a nominal amount. But I would rather see that happen in a way that's on our terms and in a place that we want it to be, or we don't hate it, that is consistent with the fabric and the look and the feel of our community, as opposed to having a development shoved down our throats that we don't really have any say over. And that's what I think what Mr. Loud was saying is, I don't want to see a 10-story building in the center of town at the Expedix facility. I just don't want to see that. And if we fall below 10%, I think we fall vulnerable to that kind of development coming here. So how do we delicately get to a place where we can add 50 to 70 if these numbers seem to be in the right realm? How can we add those units over the course of the next 2.5 to 3 years in a way that's consistent with the look and feel and the fabric of our town? And that's what I feel like I'm wrestling with. I would also say, and I maybe asked the question, it feels like we've kind of been lucky over the course of the last 10 years with some of these developments that have come in, and I think, forgive me, Metro, I guess, would be one of those, that there was great fear about what Metro was going to do to that area with regards to traffic and congestion. And I think largely that has proven out to be a fairly positive, and maybe I'm sure there's people that might differ with me here, but I think that has proven to be a fairly positive complex or positive neighborhood, and has contributed to our, the numerator, as it were. So the question I have is, can we count on being lucky again? Do we have anything in the pipeline that would fit kind of like what these projects were, that we could work with? Oh, this is the term. Talk to me about what a friendly 40B is. Mm-hmm. Because I haven't really heard that talked about here tonight, but I have heard that phrase used in the past, where perhaps we're above the 10%, but we still work with the developer to do a development that is consistent with 40B.
Right. No, that's exactly right.
Okay.
So it's a friendly 40B because it goes through the 40B process with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and it's one permit. And the friendly part of it is that they're doing what the town wants them to do. The challenge is, I guess, keeping it friendly, kind of everyone getting what they want out of it. But that is something that can be done.
Were any of those, that list, were there any of those considered friendly 40Bs that you're aware of? Do you know, Jeff?
I don't know.
Ed, does that ring a bell with you at all?
They all ended up Metro, Whispering Pines, and my favorite is Jocks Lane. That developer came in. It's right off of Lake Street, and he came in and he condensed single-family homes. And he came to the board, and we were below 10%. He came in and said, I want to build these, and it's a great development, small, but fits the town.
Yeah.
I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he's a developer. Okay. But that was perfect. Metro, there were a lot of people against that, but the town got what it wanted. It got a less condensed version of what they came in at. It was the wasn't called Metro at the beginning. What was the name of the factory that was there? Crystal Diamond.
Crystal Diamond, yeah.
And we had a lot of people opposed to it because of the traffic there. But in the end, what was built there was friendly for the town.
At the end of the day, I guess, is there a way for us to encourage developers to put in the kind of units, rental units ideally, because then we get 100% credit, right, for all of the units in that rental development? So I don't know how we would, I'm not sure how the math would work, but how can we encourage developers today to present us, or to present projects that would meet 40B and get us to 10% before we fall victim to a 40B in 2020? Is there a way?
Well, just being open to it, I guess, is one thing. There is, in order to build affordable units, so, and I have examples, if you'd like another handout at some point. Building, the sale or the rent of an affordable unit doesn't pay for its construction costs. So you have to have something that's subsidizing that cost. So oftentimes that's state subsidies. In some cases, towns are now doing, land as the subsidy for building something. So they have to build something that's a bit denser so that they can pay for the affordable units. But I guess it's that sort of fine tuning of something that would be acceptable to the town, but also would subsidize itself and make a certain amount of profit. So it's and the 40B process, because of its permitting style, just through the Board of Appeals, it's different. So I think it's a little bit more challenging for developers to go through that process. With a denser project that doesn't meet zoning, there are no guarantees there for them, so it's a risk. But I often tell developers that we would love affordable units, and if it's something that creates a benefit for the town, you know, show us.
Yeah. Mr. McQuay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, thanks. I know the elephant was mentioned, Expedex you did in the beginning was mentioned here. I'll address that at the very end of the program, because I do have questions to get to that point relative to zoning, because I do have several questions, but I will bring this up because it was brought up, the first I've ever heard of it was a couple meetings ago when you were here. Now you're talking about how can we try to address, you know, the affordable housing maybe on a larger scale. You brought up the term an exclusionary zone. I've never heard of that before.
Just to be clear, it's inclusionary.
All right. Yeah, inclusionary, all right. All right, I really need to write that down, inclusionary. Just let her off it, it's not too bad, but at least I get to the point. Inclusionary zone.
Yep.
And what you said a couple of meetings ago, and I want to put words in people's mouths, is that you and the planning board were thinking of putting an inclusionary zone at an upcoming town meeting. And I remember the chairman said, maybe we should address, you know, the density maybe in 6 months, but the town manager said, no, that's something we could probably address in a year from now. What my concern is, and we had that woman in this room, and I brought that up back then, you're talking about right now, if 40B goes right to Board of Appeals special permit, bypasses all zoning. However, if the town is looking to adopt an inclusionary zone, you stated that we would increase it, right now we have on the books 10 units an acre, correct? Right.
In the mixed-use district.
Right, in the mixed
Yeah.
use. So you were talking about maybe increasing that to 13 units per acre, a 30% increase. So what I'm looking at it, and I'm saying to myself, all right, 40B doesn't have to go to a town meeting. They go to Board of Appeals. But if we have something on the books to try to make things more denser, to meet well over 10%, if we get something on the books at the town meeting, it passes, then that could, developer could go to the town meeting, and if by miracle of miracles, and I've seen a lot of miracles happen lately, that passes, then they could go to the Board of Appeals to apply for 40B and get the 30% more in addition to 10. I know there's different variations relative to 40B, but it depends on what the plan is. I mean, you said that a couple of meetings ago, the inclusionary zoning, which was to increase. You said 10 units to 13 units an acre, and I said to you at the time, would it be, I'd really love to find out, and that was a question later, I'll say it now, other communities, what do they have on the books when it comes to multifamily? Tewksbury might have 6 or 5, I don't know. Somebody might have 20. We may have more than everybody. But it was said that we're looking at 13 units an acre. That was said a couple of meetings ago, and if you can explain, that's something that you said the planning board was looking at of an inclusionary zone to make 40B, I believe, more denser.
Can I?
Please,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, inclusionary zoning is, it wouldn't be, okay, so inclusionary zoning is something that you can put into your zoning code where when you get a project of a certain size, say a 10-unit project, you can have a requirement that 10% of that project be affordable units. You don't have to have a density bonus. You can just have it as a requirement without. I was just giving an example of what you can do. Some towns do a density bonus where, because they make you do that affordable unit, you get more units. Other towns, you don't necessarily get that bonus. That's a choice that we would have to figure out. Those are just two different ways that other towns do it. I wasn't suggesting a specific proposal. I was just using an example of what can be done. And I think it's been, inclusionary zoning in general has been talked about before. I know when Carol was here, I think it was talked about a little bit. I think the talks didn't get as far or go very far because, you know, developers have an interest in getting all market rate units because they pay more. So putting in a requirement for one of your units to be affordable and be sold for less is going to create less profit for them. One way that you can, and this was the example that I was talking about, one way that you can make it a little bit easier for them is to give them another unit or so, and that's where that density bonus comes in. Because
all right, so there has been talk about it. You saying even when Carol was here. So that tells me, let's say we took a large parcel of property, it could be anywhere in the town. It doesn't have to be at Expedex. It can be anywhere. But if we focus on that one big parcel and we included inclusionary zoning, that would go above and beyond what even 40B is requiring. So therefore, it seems like we're putting all our eggs in one basket. So let's go for this one big massive development, and now we're going to be taken care of for 20 plus years. You know, that's the impression that I'm getting and I'm hearing. But it was, like I said, I never heard what inclusionary zone is. But you mentioned they've been talking about it, the planning board. So I would like to know, how'd you hear about that? And if that's the talk, I hope that never happens,
well,
to be honest with you.
We actually have it currently with our over 55 overlay district. So with that district, if it requires, the over 55 zoning overlay requires 10% of the units to be affordable. So that the project that just came through, it was at town meeting last year off of Andover Street, the single families and duplexes, 27 units total. 3 of those have to be affordable, and that's how they proposed the project. But we currently have in our zoning right now, if you did 25% of those affordable, you would get more units. So that's sort of the, right, with 10% affordable, you get 8 units per acre, I believe it is. If you go up to 25% affordable, you get, I think it's 10 units per acre. I have to check those numbers. But it's in that realm. So we currently do have it with that district, that overlay district. You don't have to do it that way necessarily. But we do have something like it. We do have it already in our one overlay district. It hasn't been used except for once with that new project.
All right, so I'm not banging the drum, but you said, so basically it's an idea that the planning board it sounds like they have been talking about it ever since Carol was here, of this inclusionary zone to make it more denser. Maybe a certain target, a certain parcel of property in the town, above and beyond what 40B is really doing.
40B you could actually do, they don't set a limit on density with 40B, so it's sort of an unknown how dense you could go. Whereas this inclusionary would just be, set, and you would know how dense you could go. And like I said, you don't have to, you can require that 10% of the units be affordable and not provide any additional density.
And to get to that point, you're talking about a town meeting vote, right? At the local
change
level.
the zoning.
All right, so you have to change the zoning at a local level to incorporate an inclusionary zone, which would make it denser than what it is.
No.
Not necessarily, I guess. Or it could.
Or it could, all right, well, all right,
If
fine.
the inclusionary zoning was put in place, the way I understand it, let me see if I can re-articulate it. If there were an inclusionary zoning restriction that the town meeting voted for, and that stated that any developer that puts forth a proposal for, we're just going to use hypothetical, 10 or more units, we're going to require that that proposal include at least 10% of those units be affordable. So let's just say that this particular developer is putting forth a new neighborhood subdivision of 12 units. That says to me that 1.2 houses, but we're going to round up, it has to be 2. So you can't have a fraction of a house. So in this particular case, 2 of the houses in this subdivision have to be considered affordable by the state.
Yes.
So it doesn't, we're not shoving more houses into that development. We're just saying that of the 12 that are being built, 2 of them are low income, and the balance are market rate.
Right.
So we're not talking about density, we're not talking about quantity of houses in a particular plot, in that scenario.
Right.
You suggested that some towns will add another layer, and it sounds like there might not be an appetite for that, at least immediately. But I just want to, so did I do it right?
Yes.
I feel fantastic about myself. I got coming both full sides. So, yeah, why don't I go to Ed first? Sorry. I'll come right over.
I apologize for getting back to this graphic. Of the 800, and I'm going back, Metro, the rental units became part of our affordable count. Does the state count, now it's an older development, all the Regencies and all the other places as rentals, so that's part of the 810 numbers? Okay.
Yep.
I was hoping you'd say something different, but
Mr. Vandal, I'm sorry. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. I just have a few questions and a request through you, Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate. Let me just start by saying I share the same concerns that my colleagues have about this challenge, and certainly appreciate what you're doing here to try to, get ahead of this. Certainly, traffic in the town is something I hear about from folks every day. I share those same concerns. Somebody who lives in that, right near the Metro project, I'm well aware myself. If it's appropriate, through the chair, I'd like to request that, follow up to what I asked earlier, if we could find out the up-to-date numbers through this year, and I don't have, doesn't have to be exactly to today's date or the next time we meet date, but, we're in June, we're at the end of June here. If we get an idea through the month of June where we're at, and then also if we could find out, if you could find out for us, the number of projects that are on the books currently. I know you don't have a crystal ball, nor do any of us, but any projects that are on the books. What I'm trying to do is try to get a clear picture of exactly where we're at, just so we can make a better informed decision. So if it's appropriate through the chair, I'd like to request both those for a future meeting, or correspondence to the board, and obviously to the public, just so we can have an idea when we approach this. And then lastly, if it's appropriate, I'd like to ask, are you proposing, do you have plans to propose any projects for next town meeting or rezoning? Do you have any plans? I know it's a few months away, but I know you're in the planning stages. Do you have something in mind that you're looking to bring before the town?
I have a long list. What actually comes out of that list is to be determined. Things come up all the time, from little clarifications to there's always been sort of talk about North Wilmington. So we haven't really talked about that quite yet, but we're getting to the point where we need to. So I don't know yet.
Okay. Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot like that, but I'm just trying to be as transparent. I know you are transparent, but just for the residents, I feel like, oftentimes we're all busy. We have busy lives, and sometimes these things pop up in town meeting. You say, oh, geez, is that this Saturday? What's going on? Where's that packet? Or what's going on? And I just want to make sure that we're upfront and honest with folks, like you have been here tonight, going forward. That they could see something like this coming, and that if they had a problem with it, they could approach one of the representatives. So I appreciate that. And if you did narrow your search of your wish list for the next town meeting or future town meetings, if you could keep us apprised of that, I appreciate that as we go along. If there's something that you would like to focus on.
I just have a question. I don't know if it's somewhat of a follow-up. All new developments, are they required to have affordable housing to it? So, in other words, there was just, because I thought you said all new developments are required to have affordable housing. So, there was just a brand-new development, what was that, on Chevron? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. Cheyenne.
That was...
is a new development. So, were they required to have affordable housing on Cheyenne? Because you mentioned all new developments have to have affordable housing.
That's the concept with inclusionary zoning. So if we had an inclusionary zoning bylaw, or had it in our zoning, every new development would have to have affordable, but we currently don't require that. The only zone that we require that is the over 55 overlay. So that's, right now, it's just one project.
What's the anticipated project on Lowell Street? That there was a rezoning at one of the prior town meetings. Is that,
2016.
April 2016.
The
The
change
old,
to mixed use, the change the zoning.
right, the old
Mixed use,
Walpole, do you have an idea of what
I actually haven't seen anything for it yet. I know they're
What's
talking
going
about,
to be built?
I think they're talking about housing, for
Right.
sure.
Okay, so
Um,
that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, but they haven't shown me any details or numbers, so I've been asking, but I haven't seen anything yet. I think they're actually working on a sewer extension in Lowell Street so that they can service that site. So I think that's what they're focusing on right now, and that'll kind of determine what style of house or what style of buildings they want to do there, whether it's spread out or what the layout
Yeah.
is.
Jeff, you had indicated you wanted to chime in?
I think one of the intentions of having this conversation is certainly to get some direction from the board. I guess twofold, really. One is to get a sense of whether the board understands and is prepared to buy into the math, so to speak, that we're presenting here, which is really pretty straightforward about the process of the calculation that we go through. And then secondly, whether there is a desire on the part of the board for us to pursue options to generate affordable housing. Right now, if we take no action whatsoever, and I mean no action by not promoting affordable units and leave it to market forces, generally speaking, from what I gather, there's not a market incentive for developers who are understandably in the business to make money to build a development with affordable units in them. They're going to make market rate homes which will sell at market prices. So one course of action certainly would be for us to go forward as we have, and if when the new census numbers come out, if the numbers run us below 10%, then we just have to respond, accordingly. Perhaps we'll be able to, convince 40Bs that may be proposed to be so-called friendly, and maybe they will, maybe they won't. Another option is to take a more proactive approach, I guess I would characterize it as, in looking at how can we today put in place development that would generate units before 2020 or 2021 when the numbers come out. So, when the question came up about from Selectman Bendel about what are we proposing for a town meeting, I think to some measure it's going to depend upon where the board is on this issue.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just follow up with that. I mean, thank you for that, Jeff, but I think if we were going to be looking to take a vote here tonight, I'd want to have more information. I mean, I just made 2 requests through the chair for the number of units to date for this year, also the number of proposed units on the books. So I appreciate if you get that to us. I'd also like to hear from, forgive me, I don't remember her name. We have a consultant apparently we hire. The town pays, the woman's name was?
Her name's Liz Rust.
Liz, Miss
Yes.
Rust.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to invite Miss Rust in. I mean, we're apparently paying this individual to consult us on affordable housing. I'd like to maybe perhaps hear from her. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to take a conservative approach or a proactive approach. I want to take an educated approach, make sure we have all the information before I was asked to vote on something. So that's just, I don't want to step on anybody's toes up here, but that's my 2 cents on that.
Mr. Chairman.
Please.
I mean, I'm not prepared to take any vote tonight, number one. I've been asking for this meeting for the last 2 or 3 meetings, and I'm sticking to script. When Valerie Ginrich was here, I stuck to script. I'm sticking to script tonight. I'm not prepared to take a vote one way or the other on how I feel about this. I want to get some information out there so people have an understand what's going on. There's no way I'm going to take a vote tonight, and that's not my impression of this meeting tonight. It was just information, and we could ask questions, and specifically something that I've been requesting for a couple meetings, and I want to thank the chairman for allowing that to happen. So there's no, if you're going to take a vote tonight, I'm not voting for anything tonight.
Let me be clear, I'm not suggesting that I'm looking for a vote tonight. I'm simply suggesting that this meeting was intended to provide information that over the course of time, whether it's over the next 3 months, 6 months, will get us to a place where we can get some direction from the board as to how you want to approach this issue. I'm not asking the board to take a vote tonight. I understand there's more information to be gathered.
All right, thank you.
I personally feel like this using of 30 units per year for this in the next 3 years. And I appreciate you're trying to be conservative. You want to sort of take a worst case scenario and create a buffer. But I just don't know if that's a reliable figure because the range is so wide between 17 and 71 that it's hard for me to wrap my brain around picking 30. And I understand the average. But to Mr. Bendel's point, I think some of the results of what he's asking for you to go and leaf through papers, and I'm sorry, it might be some busy work, but I think the fruits of that labor will be revealing. Now, if using these numbers resulted in 6.2%, I'd say, well, hell, we got to take action. We got to start now. But it's 9.3. We're right there, you know. So I feel like if your numbers, if the real numbers reveal that we're looking at 50 or so units this year, or some larger amount, then maybe we're going to be okay. And so I feel like that information from me would allow me to take a vote or endorse a policy or a practice or an action plan with knowledge rather than fear. So I like to take action based on information, and that little extra piece of information will make me feel comfortable in developing an action plan that I can endorse. So I don't know. I think, please.
And forgive me for chewing up too much time here, but I would even go a step further. Before we were going to do that, I mean, I know it's another meeting and everyone's busy, but I really liked what we did with the Butters Row Bridge, where we invited residents in to get their 2 cents. I mean, that was really valuable information to see where the residents are, see what they want. Let's get their feedback. I mean, I feel like there might come to a point in time here where that might be appropriate, because ultimately this is all of our community, and I'd like to hear from the residents as well.
Indeed. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah, please, Mr. Lund.
I'd just like to add one more thing. Affordable senior housing, we've heard a lot about over the last several years. Let's start talking about it, and by 2020 have 60, 70, 100 units built somewhere to add to that number.
Could kill two birds with one stone, sort
Exactly.
of. Yeah, maybe a poor choice of words, but I think that's the point. I'm going to go a little off the grid here because we have some residents here that came, and I'm fairly certain they came specifically to listen to this subject matter. It's not an open hearing, so to speak, but because they've listened in so long, I'm going to go to the audience for questions, and I see a hand here. So please identify yourself if you wouldn't mind, and have at it.
Towpath Drive, and I am one of those concerned citizens. I live right in the back of 6130 Main Street, and I can tell you that there is a large opposition to any development of that area. And Valerie, you've done a great job. I listened to the May 8th meeting as well. You've made it very simple to listen to this, very easy and explanatory to us. And I understand the numbers, but the fear is out there that there's going to be a large-scale development. And Mr. Loud, I'm so glad you mentioned the over 55 housing. Since I've lived in Wilmington, that has been a huge concern for this community. And at the last meeting, Mr. Bendel and Mr. Kara both mentioned that as well. And I think you mentioned that all of that housing would go towards affordable housing. Is that correct?
It's apartments.
The apartments would. Why can't we do that for the citizens who have paid taxes for so many years, to our schools after their kids have graduated, to our fire, to our police? They're the citizens, as you can see from our previous presentation, that we should be supporting. The fear is that 613 Main Street is going to become hundreds and hundreds of apartments. That's the fear. And if we're saying we need 50 to 70 affordable apartments, and only 10%, that translates to at least 500 apartments. That is the fear that's out there. And there is a rumor, and I'm sure you've all heard it, that there is a developer who has already set his sights on that. And people are afraid that this is going to be a backdoor deal. And I am just telling you that because that is a fear of the citizens. And we have petitions ready, we have signatures ready, but we are hoping that that is not the case. And we are pleading with you to look at other options. And we don't want to fall behind the 10%. But it is a little premature, as Mr. Bendel has suggested. We're only halfway through this year. We still have a lot of time. It is a fear, but we have other solutions. We have other land that we can look at. Land, as Mr. Bendel and Mr. Carr mentioned last time, Glen Road by St. Dorothy's. That would be excellent for our senior citizens. It's still near the center of town. I spoke to Mr. Shampoo, who was kind enough to take my phone call, and we discussed that. And I just think that there are options, and we shouldn't put our citizens in a panic that something's going to happen, that we all start turning on each other. And that's not the way we want to be. As Mr. Bendel stated, this should be a community decision. And Valerie, I think you're doing a fantastic job trying to keep us at that number. And today, I even went through the 2015 open space plan. And that was part of it, to keep our forests. And that's what we're all trying to do, is keep the feel of our town. So I would hope you keep that all in mind. And I would appreciate a meeting, Mr. Shampoo, that the public are invited to help you out. And maybe there are more solutions. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Peter. Appreciate your words. Anyone else that would like to ask a question? All right, Mr. McDonald.
I have a few comments, but I just want clarification before I make the comments. You mentioned that there were 20% of the population that fell in the category of the need for affordable housing or that income level. Is that correct?
Yeah, I believe I have a statistic from the census from 2015, the American Community Study, that 20% of households in town have less than $50,000 of income.
Okay, so I appreciate that. Our population is about 23,000 people, which means that about 460 people are falling into that category. So if we're talking about 60 units or 100 units, it's still tremendously deficient in terms of a comparison between those numbers that you have from the census, which are a couple of years old. So I recognize the tremendous need for affordable housing. I appreciate Mr. Loud's comments because he touched a little bit on the senior housing. And I've spent quite a bit of time at Deming Way, and Deming Way really hasn't had many improvements. It's a site that really could use an overhaul. If you take a look at the single units along Deming Way, somebody with a little creativity and architectural savvy could actually come up with a design for that project to actually increase the units there. But what I wanted to talk about was the fact that I interact on a weekly basis with developers. And one particular developer that I recently interacted with, who I know does most of the work himself. He puts the roads in, he digs the foundation, he puts all the utilities in. And he's just completing about a 40-unit development right now in a very wealthy town. And he told me that never ever again will he ever build a 40B project. He goes to the closings and he has to bring money to the closings. And I think probably a guy like that does all the work himself, that can maximize his profit, would probably only do that if it was a mega project. And in terms of the Expedex site, if you get on the highway and see the tremendous amount of trucking, you know that there's a tremendous need to move product, to move materials by truck. And a trucking terminal like that wouldn't be moving their site out of this area with the tremendous need for trucking if something wasn't going on, in my estimation. The Teamsters are a tremendously strong union, and I believe there were like 45 jobs that were lost in this area that got moved to Connecticut. And so common sense tells me that a company like that wouldn't be making these drastic changes if something big wasn't going to happen. And I look at the amount of money that industrial properties have to pay in taxes, and I look at the values of those properties. And when a property is valued at millions and millions of dollars, and they're being taxed at over $32 per thousand, their tax bill, they're getting shock value when you're looking at their tax bill, and they're saying, either we sell this place and move someplace else, or we can't make a profit. So I wanted to offer those comments on this, and I also wanted to say that it would be nice to have some information as to the effort that's getting put into work through the state government or the federal government to obtain funds for elderly housing. Because, let's face it, elderly people aren't really skilled in high-tech professions that will bring the six-figure salaries. People are struggling out there like you wouldn't believe. You see a lot of houses being knocked down, and the houses that are being knocked down, justifiably so, should be knocked down because they're shacks. But you have to ask yourself one question: how did that house get turned into a shack? Because a person that buys a house doesn't really want their house being turned into a shack. If their income was justifying the fact that they could fix their house up and still have money to live off, that house wouldn't be turned into a shack. It's something to consider, and I would hope that this board, the manager, would give direction to our town team to start putting an effort into really looking at grants, having our congressmen, our state reps, our state senators really come together in a unified effort to try to obtain these funds that are out there through HUD and through these other agencies. So that's what all I have to say on this here.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your words.
Mr. Chairman, just
yes,
real quick, I
please.
just want to say, I will talk about Expedix later, but I just want to set the record straight. Mrs. Peterson got up and said she heard a rumor that a local developer was looking at that site. I want to confirm right now, you've never heard that from me. Right or wrong? Okay, I just want to set the record straight that I never said to anybody, any person or anybody, but I'm glad to hear that. Thanks. So there is talk out there. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
I'd like to sign up for that petition, because I will do everything in my power and hold signs, whatever it takes, to not build anything other than what's already there at 613 Main Street. Because you're absolutely right, it would be a dangerous spot for hundreds or thousands of apartments there. It's not right for this town.
And another thing I think we ought to be doing is trying to figure out a way to entice another business to move in there, right? And which would help with that tax
I'll
levy.
go one step further. I contacted somebody at Market Basket. I did this. Are you interested in another warehouse? They said, we'd love to get another warehouse, Southern Mass or Southern New England. So I went that extra mile, and I would hope to think that our town planners maybe reach out. I'd rather see industry there than any kind of housing. But I did my due diligence, and I can go on the record and say I did talk to somebody at Market Basket. And they said, no, thanks, but just too close.
I think we may have unanimity. I think we have unanimity in the belief that that site shouldn't have housing. I've heard, I think every person at this board say it, and I say it too. No one wants housing at the Expedix site. I don't know anyone that wants housing, except for maybe one person, if in fact there's a developer that has said so. And I'm going to come right to it, Mr. McCoy. I'm sorry. You have indicated at least that that it's being discussed out there. I would, if you have any kind of firsthand knowledge of anything, there's no time like the present. I'd love to know what information you have. We've heard from our planning office and the town manager and others that there have been no proposals put into town hall for the use of that site. I know there's been discussion of backdoor deals and all this other stuff, but we're not aware of anything. Do you have any kind of information?
Right now, and I'll go on the record. I'm going to be just like a paper reporter. I'm going to protect my sources. You can put bamboo shoots on my fingers. I am never going to tell a soul. And I don't just show in theater, And I'm glad to hear Mrs. Peterson said she heard. Let me tell you, it's out there, folks, and I will never, and I wanted to talk about later, I do want to talk to zoning, and I'll say something else about Expedix, and I'll tell you right now, I would never, ever give my source. And when I believe playing things close to the vest, I've matured as time went on I think I consider myself a good politician. Early on, I might have said something I shouldn't have said, but I play things close to the vest. I keep quiet. When people talk to me, It's confidentiality, and I'll tell you, you put bamboo shoots in my fingers, ain't gonna say a word. No one's gonna find that out. Thank you.
Okay. No one wants to put bamboo shoots in anyone's fingers.
I think somebody would like to do me, but anyway.
No, sir. If there's a way that we can collaboratively work together to keep a development away from Expedex, I think that's what we're looking to do. And if anyone had information that could help us get to that goal, I'd support them. So I think that's the end goal here. So I think we have some more information that we're going to look for from you.
Yeah, I have most of that, so it just needs a refresh. So
Okay.
it should be easy to pull together.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So if that could come through, Jeff, maybe through in the form of a document, and then, Jeff, we can talk about what the next step is in terms of a meeting or a presentation, and what makes sense, because, we don't want to lose ground on this, and we certainly don't want to bury it. The worst thing that I think could happen is we take no action because we just kind of didn't get around to it, and we find ourselves victim to 40B. So we want to be purposeful about the actions we take.
I would just note, doing a calculation here as we were having this discussion, if the assumption was that 15 units were developed, I'm not talking affordable, but 15 units over the next 4 years, that's 60 units. When you add that to the existing number of 7788, you come up with a total of 8,046 units. That would become your new denominator. And if you divide that amount by the 756, the town would still come out below 10%. So 15 units is not, I don't think, beyond the realm of possibility over the next 4 years. When you look at the numbers that have, been out there, that's lower than all but, well, it's tied with the lowest number, which was 2012. So just a point of information, I guess, to suggest that even at 15, we could still have a problem.
7788 was in 2010, so you've got to add.
Right, so 7788, you're adding the 198, which we know exists,
right, okay.
and then you add...
It would be about 9.5% if you did what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a little bit below.
Mr. Chairman, can I just make a clarification?
If you could do so quickly, please, yes.
I believe I misspoke as far as my math goes, because I believe 20% of 23,000 people would be 4,600. If I'm not mistaken. So I believe I said 460, but I just did a quick calculation of the math. I believe it comes out to 4,600 people will fall into that category. So that's pretty alarming. It's not 460, it's 4,600.
Noted. Anything else from up here?
I have one, since we have Valerie, and pardon me for, I want to change the subject a little on I just want to possibly throw something out there about, and Mr. Bendel mentioned any possible changes to the bylaws. And it has to do with lessening the burden of the taxpayers, the homeowners, and possibly changing the bylaw on the height of buildings for commercial use. Is there such a thing that we could have a inclusionary or a overlay district for taller buildings in town? Where right now it's a 40-foot, if we went to 60 or 80 or 100 feet, we could entice bigger development, bigger commercial development, and I'm talking strictly commercial, not living, and I'm talking about Belleville Street and Fordham Road. Could we possibly, as a town, have exclusionary or, like I said, an overlay district of certain areas of town where we could include taller buildings? You mentioned North Wilmington, where there's older industrial buildings that could, like the housing market, get torn down and rebuilt. Maybe they get rebuilt into a 6 or 8 or 10-story building where we entice a company like Keurig, which is in Burlington, or Millipore, some of those great companies that Burlington has, because they've had 10-story buildings for many, many years. And it's something that I think would increase the commercial tax rate and hopefully lessen the burden of the homeowners.
You certainly could change the height allowance in certain districts, certain zones.
But what that would do, and I don't want to happen, is to say we do it for commercial property. 613 Main Street is commercial, so I don't want it along Route 38. I wouldn't want it along,
Yeah.
I would want it along 93.
You mentioned Ballardvale and Fordham Road.
right.
Those areas are zoned highway industrial. So that zone specifically, you could propose additional height in that zone only.
I would like to talk to you further about it, maybe offline, and put something together, because I think it's something that, moving forward with this town, it's something that the town should really look at. And yeah, we're gonna need a new firehouse in North Wilmington, but get one of those developers to pay for it. We were just at the meeting last week where they mentioned Westwood, Mass, where that development paid for a firehouse. Doesn't pay for the firemen, and I understand that's another whole subject, but something that we really need to look at and think about, and I don't know if it's something that's on your long list of possibilities. Or could I add it? And talk further about it.
Everyone wants to add.
Yeah. Just something I want to throw out there to at least get in the minds of some people, and I'm strictly talking about commercial or highway development, nothing in the center of town or anywhere close. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's actually a fruitful idea that worth fleshing out a little bit. Anybody else? Yeah, Mr. McCoy, please.
I have other questions relative to zoning. Sounds like we're going to be having another meeting. I'm going to save a little bit for that meeting, but if you can just talk to me, Valerie, you mentioned at one time, is there any talk with the planning board or anybody through your office talking about maybe changing some zoning? For example, R60, so if there's some R60 near some R20 zones, getting rid of R60. What about hammerheads? Because, you know, I was always under the impression when somebody wants a hammerhead, it's a 40-foot frontage, and it goes back like a pork chop, and you have to put that 150-foot circle in there. And as long as that met, that's how folks were able to get by special permit. And I know Ed knows more about it than I do, and that's from what I understand. Are you looking to change any of this at all? Is there anything I'm not asking? You're looking to revamp any zoning to make it a little bit?
The hammerhead was changed several years ago. That's by right now.
Yeah.
If they meet that like you said, Mike, the 40-foot frontage, and I like your term pork chop, but we call it a hammerhead. It's by right now. They used to come in front of the Board of Appeals. Now they don't. So it's by right. That was changed many years ago.
Also, now they don't even need to go before the Board of
No,
Appeals to
they
get a
do not.
special permit for
No.
a hammerhead lot? And how did they get the permit? Just through the building inspector?
Yep.
And that was changed when?
4 or 5 years ago, easily, Mike.
At a town meeting?
Yep.
All right, touche, all right.
No, I'm just.
So, no, 'cause
But the other
I was always
R60s,
I was
I'd like to
told-
hear your answer to
The
that one.
R60, there's always talk about, especially the R60, where we have existing lots that are much smaller than 60,000 square feet that don't meet the zoning requirement. So you have a 20,000 square foot lot and you have a house on it. Your existing house doesn't meet the setbacks that are required, so you can't put an addition on it for sure without going to the Board of Appeals. So there's always talk about kind of redoing the zoning so that it matches what exists more so, because it appears that the R60 was sort of placed on certain areas at one point, but didn't necessarily recognize the existing size of the lots. So there are small lots within that R60 zone. So the planning board has every year tried to, the ideal thing would be to sort of chip away at certain areas where we're kind of rezoning to make it match what's actually on the ground. But it's not always an easy task. There's many other things to do. So it's on that list.
All right, just lastly, I got several things, but I'm just going to say a couple things because it sounds like we're going to have another meeting. I like Mr. Bendel's idea that we have the residents involved. And just real quick, I know I asked it before, can you eventually get to us surrounding communities like Tewksbury, Burlington, Billerica, maybe Andover, North Andover, that abut Wilmington, that relative to multi-family dwelling, how many they put on an acre? And if that's something I would love to see. And the other thing is just, if you don't have it off the top of your head, maybe something else. I have several, but I'm going to say one more. How many vacant lots are there in the town of Wilmington, maybe privately and publicly owned, like a ballpark, and what portions of that are buildable? Do we have any kind of data like that at all? And I'm not expecting you to give it now, but just for next time we meet, those two things. Like I said, I got other things, but I'm going to hold off on that.
We don't currently have that data, and it can be a little misleading if you just look at the vacant parcels, because they're parcels that can be redeveloped. They may have something on them. Take like Big Joe's, for example. That parcel has something on it, but I've heard people wanting to put a project on that, a development on that parcel. And it's a small parcel and it's got something on it, but some people think it has development potential for sure.
Yeah.
So it can be misleading just to look at the vacant. We could maybe try to figure that out, but it may not be as helpful just because it's existing developed sites may have more development potential on top of what's
And I
already
just
on it.
make a Big Joe's, that's where I got my start, but that's another story for another day. What I was going to say was, Mr. Chairman, just quickly, I said pretty much what I want to say. I'm just going to, for point of information, because Expedex came up a few times, just want to let folks know that there's a 40-foot easement at the stub of Floridale Ave. What happened years ago, it was privately owned, 6 acres. The town took it for non-payment of taxes, and that was sold. The town took it for non-payment of taxes, but there's a private easement that still goes along with that property, so Expedex has access to Floridale, 40-foot stub. At Charlie's Auto Body, where you see the railroad tracks, in that area, they have a 26-foot easement from Charlie's Auto Body to come off and on the property. And I want folks to know, and I got this information from the town engineer's office, not that I dreamed this, because I want to make sure I do it right. And Expedex owns 367 feet of frontage on Butters Row. I couldn't believe that when I heard that, but that's a fact. And just to let you know, it was the trust, it was the James D. Ty, John Bresnahan, and Francis P. Callan, map 29, lot 11V, 6 acres. Town took it a non-payment of taxes, but they had an easement when it was privately owned with Expedex. And from what I understand, that easement still holds today. So just for point of information, folks, and I appreciate Mr. Chairman, very informative, and I look forward to our following meeting.
Just for clarification, though, the easement, there's no question that there's an easement, but as I recall from what Paul Looney, the town engineer, indicated, there's some question about the easement and the legality of it, whether it was actually recorded. There's certainly an attorney would have to do some homework to look into it, but you are correct that there's an easement.
You are correct, too. He did say the same thing. It could be a legal issue, but it depends. We may say it on a plan, but where's it written? That's what we need to find out, and if we can't find it, amen. But if it is there, folks need to know they do have access on that Floridale Ave. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. LaBois. Gentlemen, all set? For now, Valerie, you have more work to do, so we'll look forward to the results of your homework, and we'll put together another plan to have you back.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very good. Thank you.
I guess we're jumping right into communications, Jeff, if I've done my math right.
The communication, the only communication item on the agenda is correspondence that I sent to Jessica McDonald, the environmental specialist at Rainmaker Associates. They're involved in a proposal referenced as in-motion wireless monopoles and antennas. You may have heard the media, I think, has covered this, that the MBTA is looking to establish these 74-foot tall monopole antennas in various locations along their right-of-way to enhance communication, computer access, and so on. There were six locations that have been identified as in Wilmington, in the addresses or the locations that are proposed, one being Kilmarnock, Eames Street, Nichols Street, Somerset Place, which is off of Mystic, Brand Ave, and then Main Street and Route 62 right at the intersection there in Glen Road. So a couple of these are more business-oriented. 4 of them are in residential areas. I just note in my letter that to the extent that these are being proposed in residential areas, that the efforts should be made to establish these locations within areas buffered by trees, and to the extent possible that they use existing infrastructure rather than adding additional poles.
Do you know if, I'm sorry, Ed, do you know if they're able to get onto AT&T's or whoever owns the poles that are out there now? Can they rent space on an existing pole?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Loud.
Is this a real proposal that we might see 6 more 74-foot poles in town? That's a huge concern. Especially, you mentioned Main Street and 62. We have a bylaw in town that it has to be within 500 feet of a resident, a pole. This would be huge.
I'm sorry, say that again, please, Ed?
There's the bylaw in town for a new monopole like this. It has to be within 500 feet of a residential property. There's one that last year was proposed. It was 25 feet from the entrance of Planet Fitness. They're appealing the decision, but we have strict bylaws on poles, and of course, Jeff mentions in his letter that you try to use co-share poles, and if there's space available, yeah, they can rent that space, especially the one at right there on Main Street. The across from near Charlie's Auto Body there. What's the name of the place?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The army place. The
Salvation Army.
Salvation
Yeah.
Army, right there.
In the Wilmington Acoustical.
Yeah, there's one there that's, if there's space on that pole, they can rent there. So I'd like to stay on top of this, and are they gonna be able to build these without coming in front of the town
Yeah.
and getting permission? I would think they would have to, but I saw this letter and I get concerned. There was a proposal many years ago when where Staples was built. They wanted to put one behind there. The Board of Appeals denied it. So, because it was too close to residentials.
Yeah, I have some concerns as well, as Mr. Lau does. I mean, what is the process of them putting these poles in?
I know it's
Do
a
they have to-
proposal, but still.
Right.
It never comes to fruit. What?
What's the purpose?
To improve their
Communications.
communications along the railroads.
Is they gonna pay for this? There's no cost for the town, is there?
No cost for the town. I mean, this is
Other than
clearly
more
something we, need to stay on top of. So my first salvo was to advise them that, from our perspective, they need to look at existing locations or at least construct these in buffered areas to the extent that they are able to do this without getting approvals from the boards and commissions. I would have to check on that.
Yeah, through the chair. Are these locations owned by?
Yes, they're all within their
by
right-of-way.
MBTA? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So it's all.
Yeah, I'd like to get some clarity too, I feel like, and it seems like there's some consensus on that as to what the process is that they need to adhere to. Is there a process they need to adhere to? And if not, can we implement one? Yeah, please.
There's a question from the audience.
Yes.
I know Andover's having the same problem, and Andover Town is actually fighting some of theirs. Because they're putting them in places that is owned by MBTA, but that is on residential areas and whatnot, and Andover is dealing with the same issue.
I think we need to be involved in this process and not necessarily thwart it, but certainly have a clearer understanding of what this process is. Mr. McDonald.
I just want to make a comment about this. Most of us would not pay the money that it would cost to get satellite cell phone service. But an organization like this that has plenty of money, I would think that this board would want to look into discussing satellite communication service for an entity such as this, rather than imposing this on the town. Just a little information to see what they can come up with.
Thank you, sir. So we'll have a follow-up communication on that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next under board to consider is a request for authorization of change of officers on the Pepper Dining, DBA Chili's. There's a number of different Chili's enterprises. There's a list here in the correspondence from the ABCC. It includes Andover, Auburn, Bellingham, Braintree, Burlington, Chelsea, Danvers, Dedham, East Springfield, Hadley, Leominster, Lowell, Plainville, Plymouth, Raynham, Reading, Somerset, West Springfield, Walpole, Wareham, West Bridgewater, Westford, and Wilmington. Because of the large number of restaurants that were impacted, the ABCC went through the review of the application and confirmed that it's satisfactory to them. So unlike in other instances where the board may need to get involved in the review, they have signed off on it, if you will, but the board, from a regulatory standpoint, still would need to sign off. So each individual community that I listed still has to go through the same process, even though the ABCC has essentially sanctioned this change in officers. So the board would need to take a vote to sign off on the local licensing authority
And this
record.
happens periodically with these larger chains. I feel like we've seen similar type of documents from maybe specifically Chili's in the past.
I believe so.
Yeah. So I would accept a motion to approve the, what are we calling this? A change in
Officers.
Change in officers / directors for Pepper Dining doing business as Chili's Bar and Grill.
So moved.
I have the motion.
Second.
And second, is there discussion or questions? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much.
Next, under board to consider is a request to for the board to sign off on the deed for the Cheyenne Drive. You'll recall that at the town meeting in April, the town meeting approved acceptance of Cheyenne as a public way. This really closes a book, if you will, by the board signing off on the deed. This will be filed with the registry, and the town will now be responsible for maintenance of Cheyenne as we are any of the other accepted ways.
Very well. To accept Cheyenne Drive as an accepted way in Wilmington. Do I have a motion?
Move to accept Cheyenne Drive as an accepted way.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Are there questions or discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Welcome Cheyenne Drive to town. Thank you. Public comments. Anyone else? Mr. McDonald.
Yes, I had a few topics I'd just like to discuss tonight. We had a meeting about the Butters Road Bridge, and since that meeting I've had some time to put a little thought into, I guess, processing what everybody had for input that night. Of course, there were people that wanted a 2-lane bridge and people that wanted a 1-lane bridge. One of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight was the fact that the safety concern out there that exists right now is going to have to change. And what I'm talking about is the vertical curve. And the vertical curve is a blinding aspect of the design of that. And so what I would like the board to consider is to propose constructing the bridge as a bridge that's wide enough to accommodate 2 lanes and pedestrian sidewalks. However, since the concerns of the neighbors are such that that road really can't accommodate a tremendous overload of traffic, that if the bridge was built with a proper vertical curve, with the proper strength that could carry construction equipment, fire equipment, for example, a crane that might have to remove a tree from somebody's yard, a strong bridge that can pretty much take care of all of that. However, having a signaled bridge that was actually a 1-lane bridge, it would be a wide bridge with a 1-lane, so that it made it a little bit painful for people to flood that neighborhood with traffic, seeing it's a street that really can't accommodate that. And so that was an idea that I had that came out of that meeting. I don't know if anybody else shares that type of idea, but just wanted to throw it out there. A couple other concerns that I have. I'm sure you probably saw the signs all over town on people's yards that were opposing the global proposal for the site on West Street. And I wanted to ask if maybe the manager could speak about this. Since there's such opposition to that, if the town was to make a move, a strategic move, to take that property by eminent domain for the purpose of building affordable elderly housing, what would be the ramifications on that, Mr. Hull? And have you thought about that? Have you seen that done in town before, where a very undesirable project was prevented by means of eminent domain for a better public purpose?
I have not given that any consideration. I think that the town has to be very deliberate about taking property from someone by eminent domain, and I guess I would have certainly some concern as to whether something like that would hold up in court if the intent was to simply thwart someone's right to develop their property. And I certainly am not an attorney. I know there have been cases where cities and towns have been taken to court because of eminent domain proceedings. So it would be it's not something I've considered.
And the other thing I wanted to talk about was somebody brought up this issue to me this week, that there was a time in our history where the town did not have a trash contract. And the trash, because we did not have trash pickup, the trash was being brought down to a place called Abigail Island, which is behind that DPW building, surrounded by wetlands, and it's actually right in the middle of our well field. And I had thought I heard about that before, but I guess my question is, was that, because I heard the trash was buried there, and it's a very, very high water table there. And so my question is it in fact true that there was a time when we didn't have a contract where our trash was brought down to the area beside our well field and buried, and if it was ever cleaned up. Also, was there some type of clever engineering done to build the shooting range on top of that so it wouldn't get discovered?
The conspiracy theory, you lost me on that one, as you always do with conspiracy theories. I don't know, Mr. Hull, do you have any feedback about the trash in that area? That certainly predates me.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any instance where Abigail Island was used as a landfill. I have no knowledge of that.
Moreover, Mike, I'll come right over. Moreover, as I think certainly you're aware, Mr. McDonald, our water is tested feverishly, and all of the water in town that residents are consuming is passing all standards. So if there's water being drawn from that area, it clearly isn't showing any evidence of the ramifications. Mr. McCoy, did you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, relative to the trash, it was a big day for us Wilmington folks. I've lived in Wilmington 58 years. My father would get the beach wagon. We'd have a picnic. We'd meet a lot of the neighbors down in Spinizola's. That's where we used to dump the trash. I don't remember about Abigail Island, but those were the good old days. Those days are far over. And I know they trying to tighten up the things up in New Hampshire, but that was a big day for us Wilmington people years and years ago. So
I think it's a legitimate question to ask and a legitimate request to get a response on. But you brought up a good point when you mentioned about our water being tested. Is it being tested by one individual, or is there somebody that is that we have checks and balances on, so it can't be rigged, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, I'm going to move on. It's a simple question. I mean, how many people test the water? I don't know. Do you want to highlight the water testing process, or do you want to?
Certainly Mike Woods would be very familiar with it. I mean, we go through a rigorous process that the state oversees, DEP. I can't speak to the specific testing protocols, but we are doing all of the things that we're required to do, as every municipality in the Commonwealth is doing. So
Just the last thing I wanted to bring up, Mr. Shampoo. I see Mr. Couture here tonight. I believe he was appointed to the Finance Committee, and congratulations on that. I've been noticing on the budget that there's quite a bit of over budgeting for articles that come before the town meeting, and I just wanted to ask Mr. Couture if
I'm going to ask you, Kevin, because you're certainly welcome to ask Mr. Couture anything you want to ask him, but it has really nothing to do with public comments at the Board of Selectmen. So if you want to perhaps get Mr. Couture's contact information.
Mr. Bendel was kind enough at the last meeting.
Mr. Bendel's an elected member of this board, so Mr. Bendel has a lot of leeway to say really anything he wants at this board. With all due respect, sir, I'm going to ask you to refrain for the rest of the night. If Mr. Couture would be willing to engage with you after, have at it, guys. So thank you very much.
Tomorrow.
That's right. That's right. Very well. Thank you. There's a Finance Committee meeting tomorrow, and I'm sure they'd love to have you. Any other public comments from any of our residents here? I see none. Thank you. New business or items not reasonably anticipated by the chairman 48 hours in advance of the meeting. I'll start off to my right. Mr. Bendel.
Thank you very much. I just simply want to encourage everybody to take advantage of what I think is the best week or so in the town of Wilmington, which is the 4th of July festivities. There is something for everybody, from young children to older folks. There's just a tremendous amount of events going on. I would encourage you to visit their website, funonthefourth.com, or they're on Facebook. You give them a call. They have spent a lot of time preparing for this, and I'm really looking forward to spending time with my family down there, and I would encourage everybody to do the same, and I wish everyone a happy 4th of July.
You're up, Mr. Gunn.
Okay. Through the chair to the town manager, at our last meeting regarding the Butters Road Bridge, the consensus from the residents was that we have a new bridge constructed, and I think that was the same consensus of the members of the board. Do you need it to be, because you had mentioned that DOT wants to know first that the residents are in favor of it and that the government unit is in favor of it as well. So are they looking for us for a formal vote on record for that, or did you move forward with DOT in that regard?
Certainly, Mike Woods is, and I don't know the exact status, but the plan was that he would be speaking with representatives from the Boston office of Mass DOT. So those conversations are happening, will happen. I don't believe that there's anything more formal. Certainly, if there is, I will get back to the board if there's a formal vote or correspondence, but to my knowledge at this point, that's not the case.
Okay, so there's
We're-
going forward.
yes, yeah.
Okay, great. That's about it, other than have fun on the 4th. I'll see you down there.
Yeah, my comments are really restricted around the 4th of July as well. I want to thank the residents that came here tonight to offer constructive observations. Fun on the 4th, all spelled out.com. Go and visit, and you'll see the schedule of activities that are going on that start as early as this Thursday. And the only other thing I'll say, the 4th of July committee and all the volunteers and all the organizations that go and participate really depend an awful lot on the attendees and the residents to go down and spend their money. So we encourage you to do that with our with the nonprofits that are on the Common. And I would lastly just close with saying that the orientation of where Fun on the 4th takes place now is just a little bit closer to some of the residents than what it was years ago. And so please be respectful of the environment in which you're having all of your fun. Those residents deserve our respect. And so I just ask everyone to be kind to your neighbor. So enjoy the Independence Day. Mr. McCoy.
I just want to say thank you, Mr. Chair, for calling a meeting tonight with the planning board director. I know we're going to be looking at another meeting down the future. I think it's informative. And, well, I mean, just finding out, we're talking about the two-lane bridge. I didn't realize until a few days ago, Expedex owns 367 feet of frontage on Butters Row. Keep that in mind now. Take care. That's all.
I'm just going to reiterate what my colleagues said. Everyone have fun on the 4th. You'll see me down there, but be safe and get home safe. Thank you.
Jeff, if you wouldn't mind reviewing our important dates.
Yes, so important dates. We have the Farmers Market, Town Common parking lot, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. That runs through October 29th, with the exception they will not be running during the July 4th. June 27th is the Reading Municipal Light Department's Shred the Peak. This is happening at the Bazell Senior Center at 1 p.m. Also, tomorrow night is the Finance Committee meeting here at Town Hall, Room 9. 7 p.m. we will be going through final adjustments, some requests from the reserve account to address a couple of budgetary issues. July 2nd, rather spectacular fireworks. June 29th through July 2nd are the fireworks, as previously noted, or the events. The fireworks will be taking place on the 2nd. Family Day is the 1st. Library is closed on July 1st. Wilmington Fire Department versus Wilmington Police Department, charity softball game to benefit the 100 Club of Massachusetts.
Can I interject? The library is closed on July 1st, but it's also closed Saturdays throughout the summer.
Right. And then the 100 Club of Massachusetts Wilmington High School softball field, that's at 4 p.m. on July 1st. July 5th is the next concert on the Common. The band is Perfect Crime, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. July 5th is next brush drop-off date, Old Main Street, 8 to 2 p.m. Again on July 8th, brush drop-off, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. July 12th is the next concert on the Common, Jimmy and the Jesters, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Next Board of Selectmen's meeting is July 17th, here in Room 9 at 7 p.m.
Very well, thank you. I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? I didn't think so. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you and good night.